Picture this: colonial America, the mid-1600s. The air in Virginia is thick, not just with humidity, but with tension. While we often think of the American story as a united front against British rule, the reality on the ground was far more complicated. And the first sparks of rebellion weren't against a king across the ocean, but against neighbors, against the system right at home. This is the story of Bacon's Rebellion, a fiery uprising that exposed the deep cracks in the colonial dream. In the colony of Virginia, a small group of wealthy planters, the elite, held all the cards. They owned vast tracts of the best land, controlled the government, and basically ran the show. Governor Berkeley, the man at the very top, made sure his friends and fellow aristocrats got even richer, leaving everyone else to fight for the scraps. So, who was everyone else? Well, they were the small farmers, the indentured servants who had served their time, and the landless fremen. These were the people doing the backbreaking work, clearing the land and trying to carve out a life for themselves. But it was a rigged game. They were slapped with heavy taxes that seemed to only benefit the rich. And when it came to land, all the good, safe plots along the coast were already snatched up. The only option left was to push west into the dangerous frontier. This westward push created another huge problem: constant, brutal conflict with Native American tribes whose land they were encroaching on. The farmers on the frontier lived in a state of perpetual fear, pleading with Governor Berkeley for protection, for forts, for soldiers, but their pleas fell on deaf ears. Berkeley and his cronies were more interested in maintaining their profitable fur trade with some of the tribes than in protecting the lives of poor settlers. To the common farmer, it felt like a total betrayal. They were being taxed into poverty, denied land, and then left to fend for themselves against attacks. The resentment was simmering, a pot ready to boil over. They saw a government that wasn't for the people, but for the powerful. They saw a system where the rich got richer and the poor were pushed to the edge. Both literally and figuratively, they were desperate, they were angry, and they were ready for a leader to channel that fury. In our next part, we'll meet the man who lit the match, the charismatic and controversial Nathaniel Bacon. Don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss it. Thanks for watching. Welcome back to our series on Bacon's Rebellion. Last time, we set the stage in Colonial Virginia, a place simmering with discontent. Today, we meet the man who would ignite the flames of revolt, Nathaniel Bacon. Picture this: it's 1674, and a young, well-educated English nobleman named Nathaniel Bacon steps off a ship and onto Virginia soil. He wasn't your typical colonist. He was ambitious, charismatic, and came from a wealthy family. He even had a relative on the governor's council. On the surface, he seemed destined to join the colonial elite. Governor Berkeley certainly thought so. He welcomed Bacon, granting him a large tract of land and a seat on the prestigious governor's council. From the outside, it looked like Bacon had it made. He was part of the inner circle, set to prosper within the very system that was oppressing so many others. But Bacon was different. He had a keen eye and a strong sense of justice, and what he saw in Virginia deeply disturbed him. He saw small farmers, both former indentured servants and free men, struggling to survive. They were pushed to the dangerous frontier, constantly under threat from Native American raids, while the wealthy elite sat comfortably on their coastal plantations. He saw a government that seemed more interested in protecting its lucrative fur trade with certain tribes than in protecting its own people. The Governor Berkeley was at the center of this web of corruption, doling out favors to his friends and ignoring the pleas of the common men. The settlers on the frontier were desperate. They begged Berkeley for permission to defend themselves, to form militias, and push back against the raids that were costing them their land, their livelihoods, and their lives. But Berkeley refused. He wanted to maintain his control and his profitable arrangements. This is where the colonists' frustration reached a boiling point. They felt abandoned, unheard, and betrayed by their own government. It was in this tense atmosphere that Nathaniel Bacon found his calling. He wasn't just another landowner. He began to listen to the grievances of the poor settlers. He sympathized with their plight and shared their anger at the governor's indifference. His charisma and willingness to stand up to the establishment quickly earned him the respect and admiration of the common people. They saw in him a leader, someone who wasn't afraid to challenge the corrupt elite. Bacon became their champion, a symbol of hope against colonial oppression. The stage was set. The people had found their leader, and the governor had made a powerful enemy. What happens when this charismatic young nobleman decides to take matters into his own hands? That's exactly what we'll explore in the next part of our series. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. Welcome back to our series on Bacon's Rebellion. In our last episode, we saw how rising tensions on the Virginia frontier set the stage for a major conflict. Today, we dive into the heart of the storm, the explosive clash between Nathaniel Bacon and the powerful Governor William Berkeley. So, picture this. Frontier farmers are living in constant fear. They've been attacked, their homes have been raided, and they feel completely abandoned by the colonial government. They're desperate for protection, for some kind of action. They turn to one man who seems to understand their plight. Nathaniel Bacon. Now the leader of a makeshift militia of angry farmers and indentured servants, goes directly to Governor Berkeley. He makes a bold demand. Grant him a commission, an official military title, to lead a volunteer army against the Native American tribes they blamed for the attacks. He wanted to take matters into his own hands and defend the frontier, but Governor Berkeley flat out refused. Why? Well, it's complicated. Berkeley had a good reason to maintain peace with certain tribes. He was heavily invested in the lucrative fur trade, a business that relied on stable relationships with Native American partners. A full-scale war would disrupt this trade and threaten his personal wealth and the colony's economy. He saw Bacon not as a hero, but as a hot-headed troublemaker who could ignite a massive, uncontrollable conflict. From Bacon's perspective, and that of his followers, this refusal was the ultimate betrayal. They accused Berkeley of prioritizing his profits over their lives. The governor, they claimed, cared more about beaver pelts than the safety of his own people. This accusation struck a chord with the common folk, who already felt that the wealthy elite in Jamestown were disconnected from their struggles. This wasn't just a simple disagreement. It was a fundamental clash of interests. On one side, you had a governor trying to maintain a fragile peace and protect his economic interests. On the other, you had a charismatic leader channeling the rage and desperation of people who felt their lives were worthless to the ruling class. The stage was set for a dramatic confrontation. Berkeley's refusal didn't stop Bacon. It only fueled his determination. What happens when a rebel leader defies the governor's direct orders? Find out in our next episode, where Bacon's rebellion truly ignites. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the next part of this incredible story. See you then. Hello everyone, and welcome back to our series on Bacon's Rebellion. In our last episode, we saw how the tensions between the colonists and Governor Berkeley reached a boiling point. Today, we dive into the moment when simmering frustration erupted into a full-blown call to arms. Nathaniel Bacon, now branded a rebel by the very governor he once supported, didn't back down. Instead, he did something unprecedented. He began to rally the common people. Imagine the scene. Frustrated farmers who felt abandoned and unprotected by the colonial government, gathering to hear him speak. But it wasn't just farmers. He also appealed to indentured servants, men and women who had traded years of their lives for a chance at a new beginning, only to find themselves stuck in a cycle of poverty. Even more remarkably, Bacon's message resonated with enslaved Africans. In a society built on rigid social hierarchies, this was revolutionary. He promised something that seemed impossible. Justice. He spoke of freedom from the heavy taxes, protection from raids, and a voice for those who had been silenced for so long. He wasn't just talking about fighting Native American tribes anymore. He was talking about fighting the entire corrupt system in Jamestown. This was a dangerous and powerful idea. Bacon's charisma, combined with the deep-seated grievances of the populace, created a perfect storm. His followers weren't just a disorganized mob. They were a coalition of the disenfranchised, a diverse group united by a shared sense of oppression. They saw Bacon not as a traitor, but as their champion. He promised to lead them against Governor Berkeley and the wealthy elite who controlled Virginia. The Declaration of the People of Virginia was issued, listing their complaints against the governor. It accused Berkeley of corruption, of favoring the rich, and of failing to protect the colony. This wasn't just a protest. It was a manifesto for revolution. The spirit of rebellion was no longer a whisper in the frontier settlements. It was a roar that was about to shake the very foundations of colonial Virginia. The stage was set for a direct confrontation. What happens when this army of the poor marches on the capital? Join us in our next episode to find out. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more. Hello everyone, and welcome back to our series on Bacon's Rebellion. In our last episode, we saw how Nathaniel Bacon, despite lacking an official commission, rallied a force of disgruntled frontiersmen. Today, we dive into the grim reality of what happened next. Bacon's brutal attacks on Native American settlements. So, Bacon and his men are on the move. They claimed they were acting in self-defense, protecting the Virginia frontier from hostile tribes. But what unfolded was far from a simple defensive operation. Their first target wasn't even a hostile tribe. They approached the Occaneechi people, who were actually regional trading partners and had previously been allies to the colonists. Initially, the Occaneechi helped Bacon's men by capturing some warriors from a rival Susquehannock group. But Bacon wasn't satisfied. After the Occaneechi returned with their captives, Bacon's forces turned on them. They launched a surprise attack on the Occaneechi village, killing men, women, and children, and plundering their resources. This wasn't about defense. It was a massacre driven by greed and a sweeping hatred for all Native Americans, regardless of their standing with the colony. News of this brutal, unprovoked attack traveled fast, eventually reaching Governor Berkeley in Jamestown. He was absolutely furious. Remember, Berkeley had been trying to maintain a fragile peace and control the lucrative fur trade with certain tribes. Bacon's unauthorized war completely undermined his authority and threw the entire frontier into chaos. This wasn't just a rogue colonist anymore. It was an open defiance of the colonial government itself. Berkeley officially declared Bacon a rebel and a traitor. He ordered Bacon's arrest and tried to disband his militia. But Bacon was now seen as a hero by many poor farmers and indentured servants who felt the government had abandoned them. They saw his actions not as a massacre, but as a necessary strike against a common enemy. The stage was now set for a direct confrontation, not just between colonists and Native Americans, but between Bacon's rebels and the colonial establishment. This explosive situation would soon escalate into a full-blown civil war within Virginia. What happens when Bacon confronts Governor Berkeley? We'll explore that in our next episode. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss it.